If you are a trial lawyer, and if the facts are on your side, you will argue the facts. If the law is on your side, you will argue the law. And if neither the facts nor the law is on your side, then just pound the table as hard as you can. The Democratic Party in the year 2026 has reached the pounding the table era, the pounding the table phase of their long devolution into the depths of anti-constitutional insanity. At this point, they recognize that the American people are not with them. They are on the wrong side of myriad 80-20 issues. They are on the wrong side of the gender ideology debate. There actually was a remarkable legal development, by the way. Speaking of the gender ideology debate, this happened in Texas just this past week. We didn't have time to cover it on the show, but Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, reached a historic settlement, actually, with Texas Children's Hospital, which was the #1 servicer of transgender mutilation, quote-unquote, surgeries there in the state of Texas, one of, if not the single largest in the broader nation, based in Houston, Texas, if I believe. And Paxton reached a remarkable settlement whereby, among other things, the Children's Hospital agreed to pledge millions of dollars to a new detransition clinic to help those who are now detransitioning there. It's an incredible settlement, possibly a precedent moving forward, as we on the side of sounding continue to win on these 80-20 issues there. That comes, of course, on the heels of a similar miraculous legal development in New York State back in January, whereby you had a so-called detransitioner who for the very first time won a medical malpractice tort lawsuit. So just one example of an 80-20 issue where the Democratic Party's institutional position, in this case, the pro-LGBTQ plus blah, 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 blah position, is being completely rebuked by the American people. They're on the wrong side of 80-20 issues when it comes to the illegal immigration debate, when it comes to trying to deport people like Mahmoud Khalil and Kilmar Brego Garcia, aka the so-called Maryland man who was making all the headlines last year. So they fundamentally lost the argument, which is why they lost all 7 of the major swing states in the 2024 presidential election. They lost all 3 of those Rust Belt swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And they lost all 4 of those Sun Belt swing states of Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. They went 0-7. By the way, if you were listening to the Josh Hammer show at the time, you would have heard that prediction right here. That was my final prediction, and I hate to say I nailed it. Well, actually, I kind of love to say I nailed it because I hope that Trump would win, but I did nail it right here on the show. Barack Obama was the #1 leading surrogate, by the way, for the Kamala Harris Tim Walz ticket on the campaign trail. So the American people fundamentally rebuked the Democratic Party on their radical issues, above all on the immigration issue, on the catastrophic Biden-Harris regime approach to the southern border. They rejected Obamaism, which was the ideological predecessor to contemporary wokeism. So all of that was rejected. So at this point, some Democrats, I think, are actually starting to realize that. They're starting to realize that they're between a rock and a hard place, whereby their activist base has shown no self-reflection, no introspection whatsoever, no ability, frankly, to compute the fact that their ideological, zealous, radical activism is completely irreconcilable, is in an existential loggerheads with the sentiments of the American people, who, generally speaking, remain sane and rational, and are not afraid of rejecting an increasingly overtly irrational political party, that being the Democrats. So if you've lost the argument, but you're still essentially in hock to your radical base, then what is left for you to do? The solution at this point is to burn down the system and to ensure, structurally as best you can, a permanent Democrat majority. This is the idea behind getting rid of the Electoral College. We had a few weeks ago on the show Trent England of Save Our States talking about the horrific advancements of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. They are now well over 200 Electoral College votes. If you get to 270, it could be potentially problematic there as far as trying to have an end around back way to gut the Electoral College there. By the way, the Electoral College actually would not have mattered in 2024 because Donald Trump actually won the national popular vote as well. So bye-bye, sayonara. It actually wouldn't have saved Democrats back then. All of this, though, this attempt to gut the Electoral College, this attempt to pack the Supreme Court, this attempt to add Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as states because presumptively they will just send 4 new U.S. senators there. This objection to the U.S. Senate in general as this vestigial institution that goes back to patriarchy and white supremacy, and this notion, more generally speaking, that the founding fathers who we will celebrate, of course, mightily this July 4th on the nation's 250th anniversary, this notion that they were just a bunch of white male slaveholders. This is what they actually believe there. This is what they believe. Because they think that they are better than you. They think that they are better than me. They think that they are better than all of this. All of this and all of us. They think that the Constitution is outdated. Think about some of the beauty of the wisdom of the founders. The separation of powers construct is one of the key structural features of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, the Congress. Article 2, the presidency. Article 3, the judiciary. For over a century, since Woodrow Wilson, Democrats have hated this. They have tried to get around it by every possible means. The greatest possible exposition and description of the separation of powers was written by James Madison in the Federalist number 51. It's an oft-quoted passage, but it is worth listening to. Here's Madison writing in the Federalist number 51. Quote, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition, writes Madison, for the very simple reason that men are not angels. This is profound stuff. This is the wisdom of men who had just been subjected to the tyranny of King George III. You can read the entire litany of abuses right there in the Declaration of Independence. They lay it out, spell it out in very, very clear terms. This was their wisdom, having surveyed thousands of years of human history. Thousands and thousands of years. They were very, very learned men, and to their tremendous credit, they devised the greatest written constitution for self-governance of men among men that mankind has ever written for one another. For over a century now, though, as I said, the left has had no use for such niceties. They have had no use for the Madisonian notion that ambition must be made to counteract ambition. On the contrary, they have only wanted to accumulate power for the sake of power, because again, they think that they are better than us. This goes back to Woodrow Wilson, who was deeply inspired by continental European philosophy, Germanic philosophy above all, and really the philosopher Hegel above all. Hegel, whose thoughts seeped its way into nihilism and Friedrich Nietzsche. Ultimately, Hegel's thoughts also gave rise, to no small extent, frankly, to the rise of Nazism in Germany and all sorts of other utopian schemes that left tens and tens of millions of dead bodies in their wake. And it's this notion that diffusing power is overrated and accumulating power, that's underrated. That's what we should do. Because again, we are enlightened. We are elite. We know better. This is how you get the entire notion of the administrative state, which is itself, broadly speaking, unconstitutional. Because, for the most part, at least, Congress cannot delegate legislative powers to the executive branch. Article 1 of the Constitution makes very clear that legislative powers are delegated to the Congress and to the Congress alone. So they've been at war with America's constitutional structure for a century now. The first transformed progressive president was Woodrow Wilson. The second was FDR. The third was Lyndon Johnson. The fourth was Barack Obama, carried into Barack Obama's third term, otherwise known as the Joe Biden presidency. And now Kamala Harris, who succeeded Joe Biden after the bloodless coup of July 2024. Now Kamala Harris is saying yet again that the century-plus-long struggle to eviscerate the Constitution continues. And as I said, this is on the ballot. This is, without any question, what these people are going to run on. If you vote Democrat in November 2026, you are voting to pack the Supreme Court, to abolish the Electoral College, and really to gut the entire Constitution. If you vote Democrat for Gavin Newsom or whoever else it will be in 2028, you're voting to abolish the Electoral College, to pack the Supreme Court, and to eviscerate the U.S. Constitution.